Hey, I'm Joe, your mid-range travel expert. We all want our travels to go smoothly, but even the most seasoned travelers still can make some mistakes. And today, I'm going to be trying something new. We're going to be reading Reddit travel mistakes and how we can make sure that travel goes as smooth as possible. So here's the prompt, and I'm just going to be reading it, and I'm going to put it up on the screen. What's one travel mistake you've made that's completely changed how you plan your trips now? I've been trying to level up the way that I travel, and I've realized the biggest lessons have come from the times I've messed up. My most painful one, I once booked a tight layover on a multi-city trip and ended up losing my bag for 3 days. Ever since then, I always build an extra time or stick to a carry-on if I can. Curious what everyone else has learned the hard way. What's one mistake, big or small, that has actually made you a smarter traveler? So this actually happened to me. It was when there was the 737 MAX plane changes and I was going to Italy for a solo group travel trip. I didn't have a choice on how my flight was going to be rebooked, and I actually had one of the craziest travel trips. It was initially supposed to be a direct to Bologna, and then I was going to have a direct to Rome. My new itinerary was JFK to Moscow and then to Bologna. And then on my way home, I had to stop in Morocco, in Casablanca, and then I was on my way home. The layover in Moscow was so tight, and I was almost sure I wasn't gonna get my bag, and that's exactly what happened. My trip was 7 to 8 days long, and I literally didn't have my bag for 3.5 days. But I definitely learned from another time that always pack some extra clothes and your makeup, your essentials in your carry-on. My bag ended up meeting me in Florence, and I did have enough clothes to get me through. I did have to buy a few extra essentials, but for the most part, it was fine. And travel insurance generally helps cover some of those costs. Now let's read what some other people have to say. Double check the airport you're departing from. Nothing's worse than showing up at the wrong airport. And people have mentioned there's 2 airports called Frankfurt. There's also 5 London airports. I actually have 2 funny stories that weren't exactly my travel situation, but 2 people that I know. My cousin was flying to Las Vegas, and she stayed with me the night before and asked if I can give her a ride to the airport. Totally fine. She said she was leaving out of New York. Normally, when she books a flight out of New York, I'm in New Jersey, so she normally picks Newark. So we were on our way to Newark, and then she looks and checks into her flight. She was flying out of LaGuardia. So it was just one of those things where we had to turn around. We ended up making it on time, so always build in a little extra time in your travels because you never know what's going to happen. I had another friend who was going to Greece, and she got all the way to JFK to then just realize she had to go back to New Jersey, where she lived, to go to Newark. So always make sure that you know which airport you're flying out of. This kind of falls in line with that same situation. You don't have to fly into the same airport you flew out of. Don't try to trek back to where you flew out of. And if you can do a trip with only changing hotels once or not at all, then that's generally much better than changing frequently. Whenever I travel, I generally try to just book one-ways. Because I'm in the New York City area, we have 3 major airports that we can fly in and out of. I always try to look at different options on how to get to and from home, but also take a look at options that give you stopovers. So if you're flying with like TAP Portugal or Iceland Air or anything like that, you can actually fly in and out of different airports. When me and my husband went to Europe for the first time together, we flew Iceland Air. We had a day in Iceland, and then we went to London, and then we went to Paris. So instead of having to fly back to Iceland, we just ended up flying direct from Paris. So always take a look at options, maybe see if that's a different way you're going to organize your trip. That has been what I've been doing mostly lately, is having an idea of the main objective of where I want to go, see if it makes more mid-range sense to add a layover with another city that maybe I wasn't necessarily expecting. Something else that this person said was trying not to change hotels so often. And I agree, which is also why I am such a cruise person. I am obsessed with the idea that you can fly to one place and then wake up the next day in another country, another city, and just experience something totally different. And you never had to unpack and repack to get there. That has been the biggest thing for me and my husband. He's not the best flyer, which kind of sucks, but cruising allows us to still experience so many different places When we went to Greece, we flew into Venice. Our cruise took us to a couple of different stops. We went to Croatia and mainly in Greece. This was awesome because then we got to fly out of Athens. So we only had to unpack a couple times and we got to see so many different places. Here's the next one: not organizing my packing. I now exclusively use packing cubes, travel pouches, folders for itinerary. I'm an extremely forgetful person, so having these things organized definitely helps me verify I have everything I need and not anxiously shuffling around at the last minute, though sometimes it still happens regardless. I'm going to be linking my favorite travel cubes and one of my favorite book bags that is the size of a carry-on technically, but can still fit under your seat, but can pack so much stuff. I'm going to be linking those in the description below. I make sure I have enough regular medicine, whether it's Tylenol, Advil. One of my favorite things is this cortisone strip it's basically a cortisone Band-Aid strip that you can cut to whatever size, which I'm going to link that too, because that is literally my favorite travel and even household essential. And just making sure I have enough of that stuff on hand just in case a pharmacy is closed, because many of those things are only available in pharmacies in other countries, and the price can be quite high, especially if you're in a more touristy area. And then if you're in a remote area, it might be even harder to get things that you know that work for you. I remember was when we were in Iceland, they don't really have Pepto-Bismol, so I was so happy that I brought my own when I had a slight tummy ache. If you know something works for you, make sure you bring it along with you, unless you're ready to just kind of see how it goes. I'm not that person though. This next one I think is really interesting. Using guides or audio guides. For the longest time, I used to just go see museums, sites, monuments with little or no planning. Went to Vatican and did not join a tour. Had no idea what I was looking at. Booked a guided tour at the Louvre, one of the best experiences I've had in a museum. Now we make sure to book a food tour for each new country we visit and rent audio guides or join tours at other sites. When I was at that Italy trip where my luggage got lost, one of the biggest things I realized was how much more a city can become alive once you have an expert talking to you about everything. That was so true when I went to the Colosseum. If I had just gone to the Colosseum and walked in and walked around, it would look so cool. I'd be like, oh, this is amazing, so fun, awesome. But honestly, during that tour, getting to understand and see where food stalls were, where the actual gladiators were, where they held the animals, where different spectators were, where different classes are, just getting that real life information come to life without doing all that research beforehand or while you're there, but just being told it was such an awesome experience. Later on during that same year, my friend and I went to Ireland and Amsterdam and Brussels, and we decided to do free walking tours, which is so awesome. I'm going to link a few options that might get you kind of thinking that if you're going on your next trip, maybe you should join a free walking tour. You just tip your tour guide a little bit of extra money. A lot of times it's like a college student or someone just trying to make it by. But that was one of the coolest experiences, because learning about all the things that you're just like walking by to get dinner one night, you understand like, oh, that was a church and this is the significance of it. And I think that also again helps everything come to life. When we went to French Polynesia, we did some things on our own and some things were guided. And I think if you do a mix of those different things, if you're more of a on the go, on your own type person, that's great. But definitely try it out, especially for certain activities. If it's going to be more history intensive and you don't want to do the research on it, it's a great idea to join the tour. And then also if it's like an activity type tour, check to see if they're going to go somewhere that's a little bit harder to go if you're on your own. When we were in Taha in French Polynesia, some of the places would have been really, really hard to get to on our own unless we were staying at one of the super fancy hotels where one of the reefs were next to. So again, it's like having that balance of being able to see things. The last thing I thought was so cool. Nate and I went to Paris during the Iceland trip. The following year, we went to Paris again. The first trip, we just kind of walked around and enjoyed ourselves. The second time, we decided to do a little bit of a boat tour because we were like, you know what? It might be kind of nice to see the sights. And we were on very limited time. Take a look at my video on that, 36 hours in Paris. I'll link that above. We decided to do a 1-hour boat tour. It was so cool. We got to see things from a completely different perspective, got to see see the Notre Dame, the Eiffel Tower. We got to see all the different train stations. We got to see the Louvre. It was just so nice to get some easy commentary and get to see the city in a different place. And it was super inexpensive. So I'll be linking a bunch of my favorite tours around the world in the description below. And here is our last one that we'll do today. It has a few different topics. A minimum of 90 minutes between airline connections. Pay with a credit card in a foreign country and select their currency. Your bank will adjust later. Avoid ATMs if you can when you're in a foreign country. If you're meeting a tour or cruise, go 2 days early if overseas flights are required. A couple of different things, which I totally agree with, but I want to give a little bit more context. 100%, 90 minutes is a great number. When we were on our way back from our Athens trip, the direct flight just didn't make sense. It was like $700 more a person. So we're like, whatever, we can just do a connection. And I did a bunch of research, and where the connection was going to be was Switzerland. It was in Zurich. Our connection was 40 minutes. I was reading on Reddit, people said it was going to be fine. It was absolutely not going to be fine. They had a minimum transfer time of 30 minutes at that airport. There were people on our flight who were like going to Miami, and while the plane was up in the air, they basically said they were going to miss their connecting flight, which was 35 minutes. But they somehow said that we were going to make our New York flight with only a 40-minute connection. We get off the plane, and literally Nate is running with his whole heart, running full speed. I'm trying to keep up. There were other people in our group, and we were all trying to cheer each other on, running through the airport to get to our next flight. We ended up making it, but we felt like we were gonna almost pass out. It was one of those things where it was the only option, and we also kind of built it into our trip. If we ended up missing the Zurich to New York City flight, we wouldn't be upset to spend a night in Switzerland. So just keep that in mind, and also make sure if you get your travel insurance, that extra night might be covered. If you are planning a trip with a really tight layover without many options, potentially build that in as a possibility that can happen to you, where you might end up having to stay an extra day or having to change your flight plans, but be flexible. Don't be stressed out. I totally agree with using the credit card and always choosing the foreign currency. Make sure you have a credit card that allows you to use your credit card in foreign countries that don't charge that fee, but if you're using one of those machines, always choose the foreign currency. One of the things that I don't agree with is when they say use the ATM to get the foreign currency out. Again, we live near New York City. One of the benefits is that you can get foreign currency at some of those exchange places, like near Penn Station. However, when we were going to French Polynesia, they didn't even have the cash there. I did some research on Reddit and found that, you can just get the money at ATMs. Even when I was in Turkey, I did that, and the exchange rate was not bad. You just pay the ATM fee, and it was pretty simple. It also allowed me to not be stressed out and also not take out more than I need. But when I did need more, it was okay. I can just go to the ATM, grab 30, 40 bucks, and then continue on. If I need more, we'll go back. Just make sure your debit card will work in a foreign country and take the money out there. You're not having to go and order money from your bank. A lot of times, the local bank will make you order a lot more money than what you need in order for it to be worth it for them to buy that currency. The other thing I don't quite agree with is if you're only meeting up with a tour overseas. They mention if you're meeting a tour or cruise, go 2 days earlier if flights overseas are required. I agree with that to a point, but also make sure that if you are flying within the country, if you're flying at all, make sure you go a day or two before, even if it's in your home country. I made a video with Nate and I heading to a celebrity cruise from New York to Fort Lauderdale. There was an earthquake that ended up happening. I'm gonna link that video above for you guys. It was crazy. We were so nervous that we weren't going to make our cruise because all the airports were shut down because they had to check to make sure that the runways weren't messed up. So at that point around like 11 a.m., we're like, wait, should we just drive down to Florida? What should we do? We were just so nervous that we were going to miss our trip because we were really looking forward to it. We ended up making it, which was awesome, but it almost made us think maybe we should have flown an earlier morning flight. That way we can have a little bit more leeway in case we got bumped to the next day and then we only had one or two options. So I would never in a million years ever recommend flying in the day of. The other thing, I never recommend flying out the day that you get done with your cruise. I always think it's fun to enjoy the city that you end up docking in one last time, especially for like international cruises. They'll go from one port to another, and then the next cruise will go from that port to the other one. Make sure you give yourself enough time to enjoy the location of where your last cruise stop is. When we docked in Athens, we had a full day to fully enjoy. We went to the Acropolis, we got a nice massage, we walked around all the ruins. It was just so much fun. And honestly, if we were like so many of the other people on that trip who were rushing to get onto a flight to get home, we couldn't do that. We love the idea of getting done with a cruise and then being able to have that one last day to truly relax and reminisce. Plus, then you don't get super sad when you're leaving the ship. You're like, oh, we have an extra day. Oh, we get to explore a little bit more and try something new. We also did that in Miami. When we did our second celebrity cruise, we stayed one day in Miami and got to explore. It was both of our first times. It was super fun. So take a look at that when we stayed at the Tony Hotel. I will link that as well. There will be a bunch of videos linked. There'll be some tours linked, and there'll be some of my favorite packing items linked below. And if you did like this video, it's a little bit different than what I normally do. I think it might be something fun to continue. Give the video a like, and also comment below what are some of your travel mistakes that you've had and what have you learned. Let's get a comment thread going. Let's share some of our mistakes or some of your amazing travel tips. Thank you so much for watching. My name's Jo. Watch out, we're going to be having a lot more Azores content coming out. Thanks guys. I'll see you later. Bye.